The dinner was already in full swing when I'd pulled into my grandmother's driveway. I could tell from the cars. My brother's brand new truck, the one my parents bought him for his birthday last spring, was parked right at the front, closest to the door, like he owned the place, which I suppose he acted like he did. Behind it, my aunt's minivan, my parents' Lexus. Everyone who mattered already inside. My daughter Lily was asleep in her car seat. She'd fallen asleep 20 minutes into the drive, and I hadn't had the heart to wake her. She was 5, and she'd been so excited about this Thanksgiving. She'd made a paper turkey at school and everything, insisted on carrying it herself to give to great-grandma. It was sitting in the back seat next to her, a little crushed on one corner from where her elbow had landed on it in her sleep. I unbuckled her carefully. She stirred but didn't wake. I grabbed the turkey craft with my free hand, settled her against my shoulder, and walked to the front door. I didn't even knock. You don't knock at family. I reached for the handle. It was locked. I blinked. I tried again. Locked. I knocked. Footsteps. Then my mother's face appeared in the narrow gap as the door opened, maybe 6 inches, her body blocking the rest. "Oh," she said. Just "oh." Like I was a package she hadn't expected. "Hey, Mom." I shifted Lily's weight. "Can you take the turkey? Lily made it for Grandma Pearl." My mother didn't reach for it. She was looking at me with this expression I knew. I'd seen it my whole life. It was the expression she used when she was about to explain something to me that she'd already decided, and she needed me to understand that the decision was final. "Sweetheart," she said, "we weren't sure you were coming. I RSVP'd 3 weeks ago." "I know, but..." She glanced behind her, back into the house. "It's just that we're already seated. The table is full." I stared at her. "The table seats 12. Your uncle brought his work colleagues, and your brother's girlfriend's parents are here. It just worked out that there wasn't, Mom, room for extra guests." Extra guests. I was an extra guest at my grandmother's Thanksgiving. Lily shifted against my shoulder and made a small sound. I held her tighter. "Where's Grandma Pearl?" I asked. "She's at the table." "She's tired, honey. She doesn't need the disruption." "I want to say hi to her. Maybe another time would be, Mom." My voice came out very quiet. "It's Thanksgiving." She looked at me for one long second. Then she stepped back and closed the door. Not slammed, just closed. Gentle and final, like closing a book. I stood there on the porch with my sleeping daughter on my shoulder and a paper turkey in my hand, and I listened to the muffled sound of laughter from inside. Someone said something and the whole table erupted. My brother's laugh, that big carrying laugh he'd had since he was a teenager, floated right through the door. I walked back to my car. I don't know how long I sat there. Lily was still asleep. I didn't start the engine. I just sat in the driveway of my grandmother's house and looked at the wreath on the door and thought, this is not new. This is not a surprise. You knew this. You've always known this. And I had. That's the thing. I'd known it since I was 7 years old, and my brother got the big bedroom when we moved houses because he needed space for his sports equipment. Since I was 14 and my parents pulled him out of public school and put him in private because he was struggling, while I was quietly getting straight A's in a school with leaking ceilings and nobody said a word. Since I was 19 and paid my own way through college while my brother, who dropped out of 2 schools, kept getting loans from my parents that everyone understood would never be repaid. I was used to being the afterthought. I'd made a kind of peace with it. But Lily, that was the part I hadn't made peace with, because she hadn't done anything to anyone. She was 5. She made a paper turkey. I started the engine. There was a diner about 12 minutes from Grandma Pearl's house, a place I used to go with my dad before things became what they are. I figured Lily and I would get pie, and I'd call my husband Marcus. He was at his own family's dinner across town, and I'd tell him what happened, and he'd say exactly the right thing like he always does. That was the plan. I was barely out of the neighborhood when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I almost didn't pick up. I pulled to the curb anyway and answered. "Is this Nina?" A woman's voice, older, a little sharp around the edges. "Yes. Who is? This is Denise. I work for your grandmother. I'm her house manager, have been for 11 years. I sat up straighter. "Is Grandma Pearl okay?" "She's fine. She's more than fine, actually." A pause. "She'd like you to come back." I looked in the rearview mirror at Lily, still asleep. "My mother said there was no room at the table." "Mrs. Missett." "My mother said there was no room at the table." Pearl's table has 12 seats and there are 9 people in this house. Her voice was completely flat. There's room. Something in my chest moved. She knows I was here. She saw you from the hallway window. Another pause. Briefer this time. She saw you walking back to your car. She asked that you please come back. She says, and I'm quoting her exactly, she says, tell my granddaughter this is her home. I was already putting the car in drive. When I pulled back into the driveway, the front door was open. Denise was standing in it. A tall woman in her 50s, reading glasses pushed up on her head, expression professionally neutral. She stepped aside to let me in without a word. The house was exactly the same as it always was. The long front hallway with the oak floors, the portrait of my grandfather on the wall. The smell of rosemary and roasting butter that meant Grandma Pearl had been in the kitchen since 6 in the morning, regardless of what anyone said about her letting the caterers handle it. The dining room went quiet when I walked in. My mother's face did something complicated. My brother, his name is Derek, he's 31 and currently between opportunities, as my parents describe it, looked up from his plate with an expression that was half surprise and half something I couldn't name. His girlfriend was there, 2 seats down. Her parents I didn't recognize. My aunt and her husband. A man I vaguely placed as my uncle's colleague. 9 people. She'd been right. 9 people. My grandmother was at the head of the table. She looked smaller than I remembered. The way people sometimes get smaller between visits when you're not paying attention. But her back was straight and her eyes were sharp, and when she saw me in the doorway, she put both hands flat on the table and started to push herself up. Grandma Pearl, don't. I was across the room before I finished the sentence. I reached her before she fully stood. She grabbed my hands and squeezed hard. You came back, she said. Denise called me. I told her to. She looked at Lily, still drowsy on my shoulder, blinking at the room. Is this my girl? Lily looked at her for a moment. Then she held out the paper turkey. A little bent, slightly worse for the adventure. I made this for you. My grandmother took it with both hands like it was something precious. I'm going to put this on my mantle, she said, right next to the photo of your mother when she was your age. She looked at me when she said it, and in that look was something I didn't have words for yet. My mother had gone very still. Denise appeared from the kitchen with 2 more place settings and arranged them efficiently at the end of the table, near my grandmother. Nobody said anything while she did it. The silence had a particular texture to it, the kind that means everyone is waiting to see what happens next. Lily climbed into a chair. I sat down. My grandmother sat back down at the head of the table. She picked up her fork. Shall we continue? She said pleasantly to the table at large. Dinner continued. Technically. People passed dishes and refilled glasses and made conversation. But something had shifted in the room, and I don't think I was the only one who felt it. My mother spoke very little. Derek talked too much, the way he always does when he's nervous, loud, performative, filling up space with sound. Lily ate half a plate of mashed potatoes and declared them the best she'd ever had, which made my grandmother smile in a way that reached her whole face. After dessert, after Lily had been set up in the small den off the hallway with a blanket and my grandmother's old portable DVD player and a Disney movie she'd seen 40 times, my grandmother said she needed to rest in the sitting room and asked if I would come keep her company. My mother started to stand. Just Nina, my grandmother said. The sitting room was where she kept the things that mattered. The good china behind glass, a shelf of photographs, the cedar chest that had belonged to her mother and her mother's mother before that, a pair of wingback chairs by the window where she used to read when I was small, and I would sit on the floor near her feet doing homework, and neither of us would talk much. And it was the most peaceful I ever felt as a child. She settled into one of the chairs. I took the other. For a moment, she just looked out the window at the yard, at the last of the November light going gray over the garden. I heard what your mother said to you, she told me. At the door. Grandma. I was at the top of the stairs. I came down when I heard your voice. She turned to look at me. Extra guests. The words landed different coming from her. She's been under a lot of stress, I said automatically. I've been making that excuse for my mother for 20 years, and I was tired of my own voice saying it. My grandmother looked at me steadily. Nina, don't. I stopped. I want to tell you something, she said, and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you respond. I nodded. I've been watching this family for a long time, she said. Longer than you know. I've watched how Derek is treated and how you are treated, and I want you to understand that I have never, not for one day, believed it was fair. I want you to understand that." She paused. "I also want you to understand that I believe I have let it go on too long without saying anything. That is my fault, and I'm sorry for that." I didn't have words for a moment. I always thought that if I stayed out of it, I wouldn't make it worse, that I'd let your parents handle their children how they saw fit. She looked down at her hands. What I didn't understand was that staying out of it is also a choice. It is also doing something. I understand that now. Grandma Pearl. My voice came out rough. You've always been good to me. Being good to someone in private while allowing them to be treated poorly in public is not enough, she said. I know that, and I'm sorry it took me this long to act on what I know. She reached into the small table beside her chair and took out an envelope. She held it out to me. What is this? I asked. Open it. It was a letter. From a law firm I recognized, Harmon and Associates, the firm that had handled my grandfather's estate. The letter was dated 3 days prior. I read it twice. Then I looked up. This is a deed, I said, for the lake house. She nodded. Your grandfather built it. I've had it for 40 years. Derek has been asking me about it for the last 4 years. He's mentioned it to me no fewer than 9 times. He called me last month to tell me he'd found a buyer if I ever wanted to sell. She let that sit. The lake house is yours. It's been transferred already. Harmon's office finalized it Tuesday. Grandma, I'm not done. She held up one hand. I've also spoken to Harmon about the rest of my estate. Your mother and father will be provided for. I'm not cutting off my own daughter, but the house, the lake house, my jewelry, and the bulk of my savings are going to you. And to Lily. She paused. I have also set up a college fund for Lily with the amount I've already given to Derek over the years. I had Harmon calculate it. It's substantial. The room was very quiet. You didn't have to do this. I managed. I wanted to. She looked at me. There is one more thing. I waited. The linden pieces. She tilted her head slightly toward the china cabinet. My mother's silver. The serving set. I've had it since 1987. I noticed last Thanksgiving that the small cream pitcher was missing. In the summer, the tray. She paused. I didn't say anything at the time. I wasn't certain. But I had Denise install cameras in the sitting room and the dining room in August. She reviewed the footage last week. Something in her expression told me exactly what the footage had shown. Derek? I said. And his girlfriend. She said it without anger. Just fact. Twice over 2 separate visits. The tray, a candlestick, the cream pitcher, and one of the serving spoons. She folded her hands. They are all silver. They are all heirlooms. And they are all currently, according to what Denise found, at an antique dealer in Millbrook who bought them in September. I thought about my brother's truck, his girlfriend's new bag, the investment opportunity he'd been vague about over the summer. I've spoken to Harmon about that as well, my grandmother said. It is his professional opinion that I have grounds for a police report. Are you going to file one? She looked at me steadily. I haven't decided yet, but I wanted Derek to know that I could. She asked me to bring everyone into the sitting room. I went and got them. My mother and father, my brother, his girlfriend, my aunt and her husband were gathering their coats in the hallway, and I told them they were welcome to stay or go, and they went, quickly, reading the room the way experienced family members learn to do. Derek was the only one who tried to sit on the arm of the sofa like this was casual. My grandmother looked at him until he straightened. She didn't raise her voice. She never raised her voice. She spoke to the room in the same measured tone she'd used her whole life, the tone that meant she had considered every word before saying it. She told them about the deed to the lake house. My mother made a sharp sound. She told them about the adjustments to her estate. My father's face went very still. She told them about the silver, the cameras, the antique dealer in Millbrook. The room, then, was the kind of quiet that you feel in your bones. Derek said, Grandma, that's not. And she looked at him and he stopped. I'm not asking for a discussion, she said. I'm telling you what has happened and what I have decided. I've already spoken to my attorney. She paused. I am also telling you that this house, my house, will be a place of welcome for all of my family. All of my family. She looked at my mother when she said it. If that is not something everyone can agree to, I would prefer to know now rather than at Christmas. My mother said, Mother? I saw her at the door, my grandmother said quietly. I saw her face. I saw my great-granddaughter asleep on her shoulder, and I watched you close the door. The silence that followed was different from the one before. The one before had been shock. This one was the sound of something being understood. My mother didn't speak again. Not in that room. I stayed until almost 9. Lily woke up from her movie and came to find me, padding into the sitting room in her socks and leaning against my grandmother's knee like she'd been doing it her whole life. My grandmother stroked her hair and showed her the paper turkey she'd already placed on the mantel, right where she'd promised. Derek and his girlfriend left early. I didn't watch them go. When I finally said goodnight and carried Lily out to the car, the air was cold and sharp and smelled like wood smoke from somewhere down the block. Lily had her head on my shoulder. She was 3/4 asleep again. "Mom," she murmured. "Yeah, baby. Grandma Pearl smells like cookies." "She does. I like her." I buckled her in. I stood there for a second with my hand on the car door, looking up at the house. In the sitting room window, I could see the lamp and my grandmother's silhouette in the wingback chair and the shape of the paper turkey on the mantel. Marcus called while I was driving home. "How was it?" he asked. I thought about where to start. I thought about the locked door and the paper turkey and the envelope with the deed and the silver and my mother's face in the quiet sitting room. "It was a lot," I said. "I'll tell you everything when I get home." "Good or bad?" I looked in the rearview mirror at Lily, asleep again, her face soft. "I think," I said slowly, "it might be the kind of Thanksgiving I remember for the rest of my life." He was quiet for a second. "Yeah? Yeah." I merged onto the highway. She said, "My grandmother said that this is still my home, that it's always been my home." Marcus didn't say anything for a moment. I knew he was thinking about the years of it, the way I described Christmases growing up, and birthday dinners, and the slow accumulation of 1,000 small moments of being made to feel like the lesser child. He knew all of it. "She's right," he said finally. "It always was." I thought about Lily asleep in the back seat. I thought about the paper turkey on the mantel next to the photograph of me as a child. There's a thing my grandmother said before I left. She was walking me to the door, slowly, with her hand in my arm, and she said it quietly like she was saying it to herself as much as to me. She said, "The mistake people make with love is thinking it has to be divided. That giving more to one person means less for everyone else." She said she'd watched families tear themselves apart over that misunderstanding, and she said she was too old and had lived too long to let her family be one of them. I think about that on the drive home. I think I'll probably think about it for a long time, because here's the thing, nobody tells you when you grow up being the overlooked one. It doesn't only hurt you, you carry it into everything, into how you move through rooms, into how much space you allow yourself to take up, into 100 small moments of making yourself smaller so nobody has any reason to close a door on you again. And then something happens. One person, one moment, one sitting room conversation, and something in you that you'd pressed flat over years begins, slowly, to expand. I don't know what happens next with my mother. I don't know if my brother returns the silver, or if my grandmother files a report, or if Christmas is an entire different disaster. I don't have a tidy answer to any of that. What I have is a deed to a lake house and a grandmother who stood at the top of her stairs and watched me being turned away and chose, finally, clearly, without apology, to act. What I have is Lily asleep in the back seat and Marcus waiting at home, and a paper turkey on a mantel that matters more to me than any of the rest of it. What I have is that when someone tried to tell my daughter, wordlessly, that she was not wanted at the table, someone else, someone who'd earned the right to the final word, disagreed. That's enough. For now, that's more than enough. And to anyone watching this who knows what it feels like to be the extra guest in your own family, you're not the problem. You never were. Sometimes you're just waiting for the right person to open the door. I've thought a lot about what it actually takes for a pattern to break. Not crack. Not bend. Actually break the way something breaks when there's no going back to the shape it was before. Because that's what happened that Thanksgiving, not just to the evening, not just to the dinner table arrangement. Something structural broke, something that had been load-bearing in my family for 30 years, and I think the reason it finally gave way is because Grandma Pearl refused to look away one more time. That's the thing about patterns in families. They don't survive because they're strong. They survive because they're strong. They survive because everyone agrees, silently, not to challenge them. My mother decided I was the lesser child somewhere around the time I was 7 years old, and that decision held for nearly 3 decades, not because it was right, but because nobody with enough authority ever said out loud that it was wrong. I'd said it. I'd thought it. I'd cried about it in cars and on phone calls and in the quiet of my own house long after everyone was asleep. But saying it from the bottom of a hierarchy and having it heard are two completely different things. Grandma Pearl said it from the top, and I think that's what I keep coming back to. Not the deed, not the lake house, not the changes to the estate, not even the silver and the cameras and the antique dealer in Millbrook. Though all of that mattered, what I keep coming back to is that she was at the top of her stairs. She heard my voice. She watched my mother close that door, and she made a choice. She could have stayed where she was. She was 81 years old, and she could have told herself it wasn't her business, or that she'd talk to my mother later, or that getting involved would only make things worse. She'd told herself all of those things before. She'd been telling herself those things for years. She chose differently, and I think about what that took. Not just courage, though it was that. It took a willingness to look at something she'd been part of, even by her silence, and decide she was no longer willing to be part of it. That is not a small thing. Most people never do it. Most people find a way to make peace with what they've allowed, to tell themselves the story of it in a way that doesn't require them to act. Grandma Pearl looked at herself clearly and decided she didn't like what she saw. At 81, after decades, she still changed. That matters to me more than I know how to say. And Derek. I don't think Derek is a monster. I think Derek is what happens when someone is never asked to be accountable for anything. When every consequence is softened, every failure reframed, every door opened by someone else's hand. That's not love. That's a very slow, very expensive way of telling someone they don't have to grow. The silver he took, the lies he told, those weren't aberrations. Those were the logical end of a much longer story that started long before that Thanksgiving. Lily will not grow up in that story. That's the thing I'm most certain of. She will know what it feels like to be wanted at the table. She will know that the adults in her life will open doors for her and mean it. She will grow up understanding that integrity is not what you perform when people are watching. It's what you choose when you think no one is. I know what I want to give her. I know because I know what it cost me to not have it. That's enough to build on. More than enough.